The Center for the Study of American Electorate, or of the American electorate, has found that despite the record spending that has taken place during campaigns for the primary elections, voter turnout is extremely low. In fact, let me give you the numbers. Of the almost 123 million voters who are eligible to cast ballots in primaries, only 18 million have done so, and states with same-day voter registration actually saw their turnout rates drop. To give you more information, 15 of the 25 states that held statewide primary elections each reported a record low percentage of voters who cast ballots. Now, if you want to look at specific parties, there's been a very steep decline when it comes to Democrats. In fact, it's about a 29% decline from 2010's primaries. And for Republicans, it's a little less. It's about 15% in participation from 2010. Now, keep in mind that this is usually typical of primary elections, midterm elections, I should say. And the reason why is because there just seems to be a little more voter apathy during midterm elections. Whenever there's a big presidential election, it fires people up, they get a little more involved, they're more politically active. So it isn't rare to see a decline in midterm elections. However, we're noticing that even though politicians are spending record amounts of money on their campaign, less and less people are willing to go out there and vote. And I think a lot of that apathy can be attributed to people who are disillusioned, people who feel like they haven't been represented by their politicians, people who feel like voting in the election isn't going to make a difference, which of course is not the case. Midterm elections are extremely important because you want to ensure that you don't have issues with obstructionists. You don't have issues with certain politicians voting based on party lines and political agendas as opposed to doing what's right for their constituents. So a perfect example of that, just to name one of many, would be comprehensive immigration reform. The Senate successfully passed comprehensive immigration reform, and then the House of Representatives, specifically the Republicans, nice Freudian slip there, decided, no, we're not in favor of passing comprehensive immigration reform, so fuck off. Okay, so if you really give a shit about our political system and what's currently going on, you would vote in the primary elections because you want to ensure that you vote for people who are going to represent you. Now, of course, we have a huge issue with money in politics. That is the virus that totally corrupts our democratic system. But it would be nice to have a majority in the House of Representatives, and that ain't going to happen if you don't get out the vote.
And that's the hard part. I think there is a direct correlation with how much money is spent. It's like you said, it's always been kind of a drop-off when it comes to midterms, and for all those reasons you're talking. But the amount of money generally spent in every election is always going up. So if there's already a normal drop-off and then a constant raise in money constantly coming up for everything, it's just going to look so much more disparaging for how much they're spending. And on top of it, it kind of does isolate everyone in real people, real Americans who care and should vote, into not really having a voice. And they're actually right. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
I end up being the negative one. But yeah, the people with the money, the people who are funding these campaigns are the ones who do get their voice. Again, which is the problem with how much money we have in our campaigns now. It's self-fulfilling prophecy, really. It's what's gonna happen when you flood this much money. If you don't have the money, you don't feel like dealing with it anymore. You're like, I'm not taking part in this, you know. Like, you're not gonna buy a season ticket to the Lakers. You don't have the money for it. You're like, I'll just stop watching.
Yeah, that's a great hypothesis. I think a lot of people feel that they're not being represented by politicians, period. So they're deciding, you know what, why am I going to play a role in this political system if I'm not being represented? But I think another part of it that definitely plays a huge role is redistricting, right? Why are you going to go out there and vote if politicians have redistricted your state to the point where your vote doesn't really matter anymore? The person that you want to vote for isn't going to get the votes necessary to win. So that's another element. But there are many different elements that play a role when it comes to midterm elections. I think the lack of press coverage, when you really focus on what the media talks about, very little time is dedicated to primary elections and what's happening with these very specific races. I think that people are definitely discouraged. I think that corporate money definitely plays a role in why people are discouraged. And redistricting plays a role as well. So it's definitely unfortunate because the only thing we really have left as Americans is the power of the vote. And I know a lot of people disagree with that, but until we get money out of politics, this is really our last lifeline. And if we don't do something to get involved in the primary elections, I'm worried we're going to continue having this ridiculous issue with the House of Representatives voting down any type of legislation that makes sense, whether it's domestic policy or foreign policy.